Hey y'all, how's it going, everyone?
Welcome in. So, how are you doing today, my friend?
It's a good day as always. Enjoying the cold Minnesota weather up here. I hear you guys had a little taste of what we get during the winter the last few days,
I
but hope you're warming up a little up down there.
I don't think that we're even close to Minnesota. So this morning when I got up, it was 36 degrees Fahrenheit in Houston.
Okay, yeah. When I took Mini Singularity out to the bus this morning, I think it was about 4 degrees. So
Nice. Yeah.
in freedom units
In
for
freedom units, yeah. Welcome in to all of our viewers. Gerv, welcome in. Ian Alex Hart, welcome in. UHF Scott, welcome in. Glad to see all of the usuals in chat. Glad that y'all are here. So, I mean, obviously, you've been in science and tech for a while. You do a little streaming here and there, kind of
Yep.
like every day. So tell everybody a little about just, for the few people who might not know exactly who you are, go ahead and tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Yeah, my name's Mark, aka Finite Singularity. I guess I start pretty much every stream with that. But yeah, I live up in the white, snowy north of Minnesota here in the U.S. I do software dev. I'm actually sort of a lone wolf programmer, so to speak. Currently working on a pretty big mobile construction field logistics app. How's that for a lot of buzzwords?
There you go.
Helping out a local, kind of medium-sized construction firm with things like time cards and equipment tracking and billables and payroll and all that stuff. So it's sort of both in the office and out in the field, and everything kind of works its way together, and use a whole bunch of web technology to do it, working with tools like Ionic and Angular on the front end, and Django and Python in the back end. I've been programming since I was probably around 7 years old. So, well,
Wow.
I guess programming in quotes at that young age. I grew up. My dad bought our family. Some of y'all in chat may know this. A TRS-80 color computer, the Coco they called it back in the day, and we didn't have a whole lot for it. He had bought it for his business, but didn't know how to use it. And I started playing around with it. So he would actually take me down to our local Radio Shack about once a month, and we'd buy the latest issue of a magazine called Rainbow, which had
Wow.
all these basic programs for different games and spreadsheets and all sorts of stuff you could program on your own in Cocoa Basic. And I would just open up to whatever the game of the month was and type it in and play the game. But it had those big 5 1/4 inch floppy disks, and they were a little expensive at the
Yeah.
time. So my dad had 2 floppy disks that I could use, and so if I didn't like the game enough, I wouldn't save it. And then if I ever wanted to play it again, I'd have to type the whole thing back in. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth on programming at a really young age, not really understanding what any of it did. But I'd like to think that by the time I was, in high school, I'd learned a few things from that, and started programming Pascal and on to C and C++ in college, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I got started with programming. I've always been a lover of all things computers and computing, and yeah, so that's kind of how I got my start. That, and you learn how to type fast. Yes, Eggsy.
Absolutely. So, I'm curious. You said that you started doing like some more programming in high school. Was that like just formal? Like there was a class that you took, or was that stuff that you did on
Yes.
your own?
Yep, exactly. So as a sophomore in high school, I ended up getting into the like AP computer science course, which was at the time all based on Pascal.
Hmm.
And there was a teacher at our high school that was really into computers and things like that, and ran the whole computer lab. And so I ended up taking that course and learning kind of how to program there. And then he had a group of students after school, kind of an informal group that we would all just go and half the time was playing games on these old Macs. There was a game called Bolo that you could play over the network that was a lot of fun, but then also doing some programming and stuff and learning other languages and everything. So that kind of got me deeper into it in high school.
Wow. Yeah, I remember we had our first like home computer was a 386,
Okay.
and we obviously like I was pretty young, and so I was curious about video games. And so I
Yep.
remember sitting on the 386 and we had a game called Gorillas where you put in the angle and the velocity, and it
Yep.
would chunk the banana, and the banana would explode, and you're trying to take out the other gorilla. Which now I think the thing that's most similar to that would be the game Worms.
Yep. Yep.
The other game that I loved was Battle Chess.
Okay.
And Battle Chess was like, you would, click the board and the pieces would animate and
Hmm.
transform and like move around yeah. So that was like my first like thing that I did on computers. And I totally remember the big 5-inch floppy disks
Yep.
and all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, was it always programming? Did you ever have like other stuff that you thought about doing, or was it just always like, I want to program, this is what I want to
Yeah,
do?
it's funny. Programming was something I loved to do, but I never originally looked at it as kind of a career thing.
Mm.
I grew up in our house. My dad was a mechanical engineer and had his own company that he basically did food packaging equipment. So he'd buy these food packaging machines, and he had his own company. So he'd actually bring them. They'd be sitting in our garage. My poor mom could never park her car in the garage in the Minnesota winter because there was always machinery sitting in there. And then he would modify that machinery to package things in a different way for another company. And
Oh
I
wow.
would spend tons of afternoons with him out in the garage after school, just working on building these machines up and doing the engineering side of it. So that was my other real love. And so when I went off to college, originally I went into biomedical engineering because I wanted to do things like artificial hips and physical structure kind of things. But the school that I went to, it turned out that all they did was sort of the electrical engineering side of biomedical, like pacemakers and ultrasound machines and that kind of stuff. So I decided if I wasn't going to do really small structural kind of stuff, I would do like buildings. So I actually transferred over into civil engineering at that point and did structural engineering as an undergrad. And so that was, you know, it was one of those things where my programming skills really backed up what we were doing. Because
Mm.
as we were learning this stuff, I was actually always writing programs either in MATLAB or C that would essentially check my homework for me to make sure that I had done all the calculations right, and
Yeah.
did a whole lot of stuff like that while I was an undergrad. So programming was always sort of this tool in my toolbox that I had, but it wasn't necessarily the direction I aimed to go as a career. And, as we see, you make plans and they don't always pan out exactly how, the journey doesn't always go exactly how you planned it out. So,
So what was the inspiration for the structural engineering side? I find that interesting because I actually my previous role I worked for an engineering firm in
yep.
Houston, and it's one of the very famous structural engineering firms here in the US, and they are famous specifically for large stadiums, especially moving
Yep.
structures.
Yep. For me, it was building, right? So I was one of those kids. I loved building with Legos as a kid. I loved, building forts in our yard, stuff like that. And then working with my dad on all this equipment, it was always sort of creating something out of just raw materials, right? And
Yeah.
for some reason, that was just always something I absolutely loved to do. And so then finding a field where I could study that and do that was a huge interest in that.
Yeah, I'm sure that probably also lends itself to programming because you basically go
Oh,
from
absolutely.
idea and
Absolutely.
you build everything from scratch, or
Yep.
you take that idea. I always kind of joke that programming is almost like wizardry, just because you're moving the zeros and the ones, and creating this something out of nothing essentially.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
what was like your college path like? How
Yeah,
did you
so
get
so
into
my
that?
my college path, I really didn't think a lot about computer science and programming while I was an undergrad, right? So I was in a civil engineering program. It was a pretty high profile program. A lot of pressure. We had a really good group. Our class was pretty small. It was about 35 students, and we were all pretty tight knit. And I just kind of emerged as, that guy who could program in the various study groups and things. So whenever it came to programming, there was a lot of people that would come to me for, help with when we were working on those types of assignments and everything.
Yeah, sure.
At the time, I was really kind of thinking I was just going to be a structural engineer. The one thing that they don't tell you when you begin structural engineering in college is secret. Structural engineers don't get paid very much for what they do, and it's a very stressful job. So you look at that, and it's not that it's all about the money, but it's one of those situations where a lot of people in structural engineering don't feel that the field itself gets compensated for what they really do. We're building structures to stand, right,
Yeah.
and to not fall on people, which is kind of important. So later on, as when I was a junior in undergrad, I applied for a program that the university had where you could work one-on-one with a professor and do kind of more graduate level research. And you do it for a semester as a junior, and then over the summer, and then both semesters as a senior. And it was a pretty competitive program to get into. However, they had 2 slots for structural engineers, and my friend Chris and I were the only 2 who applied. So by default, I don't know if I would have gotten it had it been more competitive in structural engineering, but both of us ended up doing this. We were quite close friends, so we kind of worked side by side on things. And I ended up in a lab doing seismic engineering. So the professor had it was like a 6 foot by 6 foot shake table, and we would build these 10 or 15-foot high structures and use different damping techniques to try to damp out the oscillations when the structure would be shook. And it involved a whole lot of programming. So there I got to start using my programming skills again. And by the end of that project, I had realized I loved research so much that I decided to apply to some graduate schools. And this was right around 2001. The market suddenly crashed. We all know about the whole dot-com bubble that happened. And this really odd thing happens where
You're
when
dating
the
yourself
economy
now.
crashes, people don't build structures anymore. So I'd applied to all these graduate schools, and I was getting, graduate students are not known for getting paid extremely well.
Hmm.
The offers I was getting back from graduate schools, which were not like super high offers, were offering to pay me more than large structural engineering firms were offering me at the time,
Oh
just
my goodness.
because nothing was happening in the field. So
Yeah.
I decided at that point to go on and get into a PhD program and take the research route, which then took me on to graduate school. So where I did more of the same. I did a lot of I went into structural risk assessment. So
Mm.
I wanted to pick kind of a field that might be a little more broad. A lot of times in graduate schools, when you get a PhD, you kind of narrow down your scope of focus so much that there's like only one job in the world that you could ever do when you
Right.
come out. And I tried to fight that a little bit because I didn't know if I wanted to stay in academia, and was quite thankful that I did. So spent about 4 years getting a PhD working on that, and then went on. Obviously, that had a lot of programming because it was all risk assessment, it was all modeling, and
Yeah.
that's really, I think, in graduate school is really where my programming took off, because I was doing it 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, putting together these models and everything, and had the chance to really do some neat stuff. Worked on large clusters of computers to do high performance computing that was distributed on what we called Beowulf clusters in the day, which was just a whole bunch of servers in a server room.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of that, I ended up taking on a postdoc with the same research group. Long story short, some bad stuff happened. The research funding got pulled from that particular research group, and I was sitting kind of looking at, I was supposed to have a 2-year postdoc, and I had 2 weeks to go find a job somewhere with a PhD, which is a bit of a tough position to be in.
Yeah.
PhD kind of job searches typically take on the order of like 6 months to a year. So
Sure.
the head of our department, who was on the environmental engineering side, came to me and said, "We heard you're a good programmer. We need someone to do programming in our group doing carbon capture and storage," because they were on sort of the more environmental engineering side of things, and offered me a 6-month position with him to help shore up all of their software and everything that they were developing. And 2 years later, we decided to spin up a company out of that research group, in the carbon capture and storage field, which at the time, this would have been around like 2009, 2010,
Yeah.
was kind of a big topic. It was something that looked like it was really going to take off. So we started up this consultancy, um, essentially running models on software that we had developed at the university. And that lasted about 2 years until that industry completely imploded and essentially disappeared overnight.
Wow.
And so it was one of those like journeys that I would have never expected. But for a couple years there, I got to, think I was helping save the world, which is very fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was actually probably the programming and the experience in my career so far that I have wholeheartedly enjoyed the most. I mean, I love what I do today. Don't get me wrong. But there was something about that. It was this sort of cutting edge modeling. It was doing something that really felt like you were going to make an impact on the world,
Yeah.
in terms of fighting global warming and all these other things. And so it was just a really, really exciting time, using some really cool technology and doing a lot of really neat stuff. When that fell apart, I ended up getting pulled into, probably the lowest point of my career, over into the finance sector, where I did a lot of, using sort of those risk assessment tools I learned as a PhD, developing software for doing portfolio analysis on high income households, very complex portfolios of assets and holdings. And it was sort of soul-sucking work. It was totally the opposite. It was not fulfilling to me.
Yeah.
The people I was working with, many of them were not the kind of people that I wanted to be around. So I kind of suffered through about 4 or 5 years of that until I got back to the option to start this construction software, which was about 4.5 years ago now, and I've absolutely loved every minute of doing that. So that's
great.
kind of the crazy story of how a PhD in structural engineering is now a software developer.
Nice. So Anthurium pointed out this is completely off topic, but your microphone is very cool.
Oh, yeah, it's a little, what do they call it? The blue snowball.
Oh, is that what that one is?
Yeah.
Nice. And then our friend UK Maddles has a question. Would you venture back into data work around conservation, etc., like defining models for running in the folding at home project?
I very well may. The one thing that I really found with diving into carbon capture and storage is it's very hard to write good software before you have a very deep understanding of the science behind it, right? And so a big part about that would be, if it was something like a folding at home project, would be shoring up my knowledge of, what is protein folding and what, I don't really understand it at all. And so, there would be a pretty heavy lift in a field like that, but moving towards, back into carbon capture and storage per se, it's starting to get a little bit more traction these days, or,
right.
Something in structural risk or risk assessment in general, finding a niche where I can use those skills that I built as a graduate student and over this journey, would be optimal. We'll just say that.
Yeah. So I worked for an engineering firm here in Houston with a lot of incredibly intelligent people.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything now is done, using 3D modeling. A lot of the structural tools are like utilizing, Revit, or, like our civil group use like Civil 3D. It's a lot of Autodesk products, which is the big software vendor. And there's a ton of other software that is all about modeling, and there's a lot of models that they run for, like, so the company does a lot of stadiums, and they have
Yep.
like movable roofs and things like that. And so they do a lot of analysis on like what would happen if a hurricane came,
Yep.
and
Exactly.
that kind of stuff. And that, to me, like all of that kind of stuff was, number one, way above my head. And number two, like super incredibly fascinating just to see stuff like that happen. And then there's even like really cool stuff that they're doing with like, point cloud modeling, where they're utilizing drones to go, and it basically, I hope I'm paraphrasing this right. Somebody's probably going to blast me because I'm saying it wrong. But essentially, like the drone is essentially like using either a laser, like LiDAR or something like that, to like scan the exterior of a facility.
Yep.
And as it's doing that, it generates this point cloud, which is all of these points in a 3D space. And then what you can do is you can take that point cloud and you can create a model out of it in a 3D environment.
Yep.
And so they were utilizing that technology to basically do like diagnostic inspections on existing buildings to basically make sure that there wasn't anything necessarily structurally wrong with the facility.
Yep.
And doing analysis that way. Like all of that stuff to me is just like incredibly fascinating and super cool.
It's really neat. I remember one project I worked on early as a graduate student. So I started graduate school in September of 2001. In fact, my first day in my dorm room there was September 10th. And so, I was out in New Jersey, real near New York City, and our university got some projects to analyze some of the damage to the surrounding buildings around the World Trade Center.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that we were working on is it wasn't quite as sophisticated with drones and whatnot, but they actually used a helicopter to take photos of the sides of a couple buildings that had been damaged. And we were analyzing the deflection of those structure versus known photos of the structure before, to ensure that there wasn't too much of a deflection, that those structures weren't going to fail as they were trying to clean out the rubble
Wow.
that was right in the middle of it. So it was
Yeah.
kind of an interesting and very sobering project that I was able to work a little bit on as a young grad student.
So I feel like we should be calling you Dr. Singularity.
No, it's totally not necessary. I always joke that the only people that I'll request call me doctor are if my kids have any really snotty friends. We'll be like,
Oh, there you go.
That's Dr. Mark.
Yeah, Matty Two Shoes says you need to change your username now. Needs to be. Too bad Dr. Dynamite's not in the chat.
Yeah.
But he's not. I don't think he's a real doctor. It like reminds me of. Do you watch Big Bang Theory?
I have long in the past.
Yeah, so it just reminds me of like all of those instances where they're like, Dr. Hofstadter, Dr. Mr. Wallowitz.
Yeah. It's funny because even like in academia, there's this image that's the case, but for the most part, it's professor if someone is actually like a full tenured professor, and then nothing. Like, so that's the one. Once you get the doctor, that's just, you had to get there. It's whether you've got that professorship.
Yeah, my previous role, like, again, I worked at this engineering firm with some amazingly brilliant people, and there's a good number of people at that company who have doctorates.
Yeah.
In their field. We have like people who are doing like diagnostic engineering and civil engineering and structural engineering. Yep. It's a very diversified firm, and I mean, just incredible some of the work that these people do. But yeah, nobody was ever like super pretentious and like, oh, I'm doctor. Yeah. So it's like, it was,
it's one of those things that I've very, very occasionally brought out, especially when I was in finance. And it was mostly when it was a subject that my PhD actually related to, risk assessment. When, you'd be meeting with someone who wanted to talk about risk, you'd you'd pull out the version of your business card that had the doctor on the front of it because it was actually in a field that was applicable.
Yeah.
And outside of that, it's I don't know. It's
So you did all of that work. You went into the finance sector and had the, as you said, the soul-sucking job.
yeah.
What led to what you're doing in your current role? Like, what made you make the switch to I'm gonna be self-employed and write my own software?
Yeah, so the self-employed bit, my dad was an entrepreneur. Both my sisters are entrepreneur. My brother's an entrepreneur. Everyone has their own business, and
So
it's
it's in the
something that,
blood.
my dad kind of instilled in us growing up. Not like you have to do this, but this is possible.
Yeah.
And so that piece of it was kind of easy. When I came out of graduate school, I spun up this company doing the carbon capture and storage stuff, which was my own, kind of thing. And so it was, it was something that was kind of in my blood, so to speak.
Yeah.
Sometimes to Mrs. Singularity's chagrin, sometimes she's like, you need to just go get a job that's just a stable 9 to 5, kind of thing, because it can be stressful, because you never know what's around the corner. And on the
Yeah.
plus side of it, whatever you bring in the door is yours. You don't have to share, so to
Yeah.
speak. But in terms of this particular software project, back when I was a graduate student, I would do web dev on the side. And my current client that we've been building this whole logistics software for is actually someone fairly close to me, who I knew way back then. And they wanted to essentially go from paper time cards to some sort of a web system where their employees on the weekends or whatever could enter in their hours for the week and just track time cards that way. And so built that system probably back in like 2003, 2004, something like that. And they used it nonstop. It's horrible code. It was PHP spaghetti code with like raw calls to MySQL databases. I mean, it was not necessarily something that I'm proud of, especially from a security point of view. I don't know how that thing stayed up, but they used it from around 2004 until 2019,
Oh
actually
my gosh.
2020, when we
Wow.
launched this particular product. And they came to me in 2017 and said, we'd really like to bring this to the next level. We've got these mobile devices now. We've got all this new technology. We'd really like to take this to the next level. Would you be interested? And like I said, the work that I was going through in the finance sector, some really, really upsetting and bad stuff had happened that were pulling at my morals. I basically chose to refuse to do some stuff. And it was putting a lot of tension into the situation. And so this was an opportunity for me to get out of a very toxic environment. And so I chose to. And in doing so, about the only way I could do it was by starting up my own thing and going forward with it. So it was a bit of opportunity during a very dark time that panned out extremely well.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually thinking about this before our conversation today, and I've had situations where I've thought about like, oh, I could totally build this thing and it might become something.
Yeah.
What if I just like went all in on this? And like that's when the fear and the terror set in, and it's like but I have a family and I have a mortgage, and what the heck am I thinking?
Yeah.
And so like I think that's probably like the hurdle that a lot of people face when they're thinking about, because like my wife always jokes with me. She's like, you could just go invent Google or something and then we would be set. And I'm like, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I don't see that happening realistically.
It's a little bit. There's a little more involvement than just.
But it's interesting. Like you think about like you've had some side projects that you've done on stream that you basically did it. Like, I'm talking about Tau specifically,
Yep.
which, for people in chat who are unfamiliar with Tau, Tau is the Twitch API unifier. And this was basically like this passion project that you did because working with the Twitch APIs was just awful, because you had like two different things that you had to deal with and you had to juggle. And so you were like, I'm just going to fix this.
Yep.
And it essentially like blew up into this thing that all these people started using.
Yep.
And so it's like you think about situations like that, and it's like, this could totally like be a thing, or like, I have this idea and I want to build this. It could totally become something that people use.
Absolutely. And I think it's a matter of finding that, I mean, to put it bluntly, finding that pain point, in terms of like a lot of like normal convenience stuff. A lot of that software, I believe in many cases, has been written. I mean, of course there's going to be like new things that we can write software for that we didn't even know we needed, and they'll be super convenient and wonderful. But I think the lower hanging fruit on the tree right now is we've got so much technology around us, and there are still so many pain points. There are still so many things that take longer than they should, or are more frustrating than they should be. And so I think, if we're looking for ideas that could be, at the least something like Tau, where it's an open source project that's helping a lot of people, and you're getting a ton of value and enjoyment personally out of developing that, to I want to start up a business that could, support my family or become the next big thing. I think the low hanging fruit out there are finding those pain points that we can step in as developers and help to fix.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. So UK Metals has a question. Tau as a service, is that a thing?
Yes. So UK Metals, a lot of people are asking about Tau as a service, and I'm definitely interested. It would need a lot of tweaking. Right now, it's really only built for a single streamer, and so we'd have to build out Tau in such a way that you could have multiple accounts from one Tau service, which I think would be all sorts of awesome. Twitch recently has loosened some of the restrictions on API calls and on event sub calls, which actually makes something like Tau as a service a lot more possible. So it's definitely something I've had rattling around in my mind for some time now. The question is, how big of a market would it be? Now we've got some tools like StreamerBot, which a lot of them not as tech savvy streamers are using, and it's a wonderful, amazing tool. I mean, you can prototype and you can build out some. You're using it. You're not
actually
using Tau.
So so here's the thing that I've done. So I've used White Panther's bot, which was PantherBot, and I had that spun up in an instance in my own, cloud. And I used that for a really long time. The reason that I stopped using it was because obviously PantherBot is specifically for White Panther. Yes. And every time there was an update to that repo, I had my own individualized fork that I was constantly having to individualize. And there was a lot of Panther specific stuff in there. And so I wanted to stop using it because of that. Just because I was being lazy and didn't want to maintain my fork. So then I used Tau for a couple of overlay projects that I was doing. And then, which, I mean, that was really easy to spin up. You just get a well, I say easy. I shouldn't say that. So for me, it was fairly easy just because I spun up a Docker container, got it up and running, hooked into the endpoint, and I was good to go. Then we used StreamerBot. I was introduced to StreamerBot by Heck Brent during Signal TV last year when we were doing the Signal stream. Yep. And I'm a .NET developer, and the entire thing is developed in .NET, and I can run C# code inside of it. And I was like, ooh, that's really interesting. So
it is. It's really cool.
So I pulled down StreamerBot, and I started playing around with that. And so, like, that's actually what's running the stream right now. That's basically what allows people to, like, change the lights on the guitar, on the LEDs behind the guitars and stuff like that. So yes, please do not be offended. I'm not using
No,
Tao.
not at all. Not at all. I mean, these
I
are
know
all
you're
just
joking.
tools, and I think Tao has a place amongst them. I think Tao is a little bit more. I'd argue that it might be a little bit more sort of low level. So someone who's really more interested in getting deep in the weeds, someone like Matty Two Shoes, who's trying to build, databases of mineable data for metrics and things like that. I think Tao is probably a bit more along those lines. And then also, I think for more of the software dev streamers who are more interested in writing code that just integrates directly with something, writing an overlay that sits out on the web. And I think Tao's definitely got a place there. I think StreamerBot is fantastic, especially when you're dealing with .NET. And also, I think StreamerBot is great for people who don't have as much programming background and want to put something together real quick. And it's absolutely fantastic for that. And I'm all about having as many different tools in the toolbox as we can have.
Yeah,
So.
I think for me the biggest appeal of StreamerBot was the fact that I could essentially get rid of stream elements and some of the other tools that I was using, and it made it really simple to do that. I wasn't necessarily going to have to go write my own. Which, some people might argue that I'm cheating a little bit as a developer there.
No, I mean,
but it was just like, hey, I want to use this thing, but I'm sick and tired of stream elements doing all of this extra stuff. Let's just see if I can have everything in one place. Because I had, stream elements, and I had Nightbot, and I had, a bot running locally, and it was just way too much to manage.
Well, it also gives me a challenge to bring you back over to the Tao side.
There you go. Yeah. So, but I think you made a really good point there that Tao in and of itself is basically, it unifies those APIs, brings everything together, but it's at a lower level than what StreamerBot is.
Yes.
And so it's really serving a completely different community.
Correct.
Than what StreamerBot is doing. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily think that because somebody is using, if you have anybody in chat who's using StreamerBot, that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't utilize Tao for other things.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And so,
whatever works for you, it's. I built Tao for the community, and I know that it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing that'll serve everyone. And I just hope that it serves those people who are using it. And fills their needs, which
absolutely,
was kind of the goal from the start.
Yeah, and speaking of Heck Brent, I mentioned Heck Brent, and there he is. Welcome in, Heck Brent. So I'm curious as to what are the things that you're working on now that are maybe you have a passion project. Is there anything that people don't know about that you've been working on, or that you've been thinking about working on that you might want to share?
Well, so one of my passions that we haven't talked about here, and it's only been very recently that I've even really talked about it on stream, is downhill skiing. That's like my true love. That's the thing that I will drop everything and just the opportunity to ski. I don't care if it's a little bump here in Minnesota or out in the big mountains out west. I absolutely love to stream, or love to ski. I love to stream too. And this whole idea of sharing my passions with my community, that we started doing some of these ski streams where I'd go out and, just see if, it was sort of an experiment, see if we could get the GoPro streaming from the mountain for Twitch chat to view.
Which, if people have not seen any of those ski streams, that is stinking amazing. Watching that, I actually thought about you. I was out of town last week, and I went up to visit some family in New Hampshire.
Yep.
And it was weird because the Texans came to New Hampshire, and all of a sudden the temperature went to 60 degrees, and they got rain, and all the ice and snow melted.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we drove up to a place called, I think it's called Pat's Peak.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, and we wanted to take my daughter snow tubing. And, we went up there and there's all these people skiing and snowboarding. And I immediately thought about, oh, this would be so cool if I could get like trajectory data
Yes.
off of a
Yep.
device and like track
Yep.
this and stream it.
Yep.
So can you kind of talk us through like, can we get behind the scenes and talk about like how exactly that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first time I did it, I didn't have any of the telemetry stuff that we later built. It was literally just getting out there and seeing, can we get a signal reliably from my GoPro all the way back home to my streaming PC and up on a stream. So
So
we
is
did
that using cellular?
yeah, so the GoPro itself, we'll get into the weeds now. So the
Okay.
GoPro itself can connect to an RTMP server, which is, I think it's real-time messaging protocol is what it stands for.
Okay.
And I believe RTMP or something like it is actually what Twitch uses, and that's the type of signal that OBS sends to Twitch, or at least it was for a while. That may have changed, but RTMP, it allows you to put a server on any machine and basically stream video to it. And the GoPro supports doing that basically via Wi-Fi, because
Okay.
all of the new GoPros have a Wi-Fi chip on them. So what you can do is you can set up your phone as a hotspot and stream through your phone back to any RTMP server.
Oh my
So what I
gosh.
ended up doing is setting up an RTMP server on my streaming PC here, and through routing and stuff, basically gave the outside world access. And I don't even think there was any password or anything on it when I set it up, because you couldn't do that through the It was kind of crazy. But I figured, I'm driving to the ski hill, I'll turn it on, drive to the ski hill, do the stream, come back and turn it off.
Yeah.
So that's how we originally set everything up, and it was successful. However, there were GoPro software issues that I later worked out and stuff, and eventually we got that working pretty stably from my local ski hill. So then I was thinking, just watching the point of view from skiing, that's fine. People might enjoy it a little bit, but you don't really get the sense of speed or altitude or anything like that from just watching a stream like that. So I started thinking, I do all this app development that grabs data from the field and sends it back to a server. What if we could just do that in real time with GPS data, where we can get the current speed, the altitude, the position, all of this different data, and stream that back and bring it as an overlay over the top of the skiing. So that way people could see what altitude I'm at, they could see how fast I'm going. We could even track a maximum speed that was achieved during the session, things like that. And so spent a couple streams building out an iOS app that could gather all this information and send it back. And then I started thinking about, well, I can't monitor Twitch chat while I'm actually skiing, right? And
Right.
part
Yeah.
of the whole thing about streaming is interacting with chat. That's my favorite part about streaming, is interacting with the community. And so I wanted to be able to know what the community was saying while I was streaming. Obviously the GoPro has a mic, so you could hear me speak and things like that. And so then we started working on stream on how can we get around some of Apple's limitations. I mean, this app will never be able to pass the App Store, but I can install it locally here. And we ended up doing text to speech backgrounded in the app from Twitch chat.
Wow.
And so while I'm streaming, as Twitch chat is talking, I'm hearing, it's reading to me what Twitch chat is saying. I've got a button I can press to mute it, because obviously people always abuse text to speech at times. And, in my head, I'm like, okay, if I'm out west doing some like crazy, shoot, because when I go skiing, I get a little bit extreme with it. I do some of the crazy stuff, and you might not want Twitch chat, reading the alphabet to you when you're dropping into an avalanche chute somewhere.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
the ability to turn that off was a good feature. But we got this whole app working. We got it all wired up, and it works great. You can build a custom overlay. We built one that looks like a speedometer kind of a deal. Yes, Maddie, I think were you the one who started doing that? Someone started doing that.
Stop it, Maddie.
One of the streams. So yeah, we built some different overlays with different styles, and it was just a whole lot of fun to kind of get that kind of stuff set up. I'd love to be able to start putting my GPS position on like a map of a ski area, showing, where I currently was going down a run, things like that. It's a pretty fun project, something I've been enjoying the heck out of doing, because it really is bringing together two of my favorite things, programming and skiing. Three of my favorite
That's
things:
amazing.
streaming, programming, and skiing. And some simpler ideas even for this summer. One thing I love to do in the summer is canoeing, and we've got a great park around us where you can canoe, and you can portage the canoe from lake to lake and make your way around. And so we might have some really chilled out afternoon streams that just show where on the lake I am, and I can just kind of talk with Twitch chat while enjoying, some beautiful scenery and hauling a canoe for half a mile between lakes, and doing fun stuff like that. So it's got some other applications too
And
that
so
might be a lot of
you're
fun.
literally using the telemetry data from the phone using the sensors on the phone. And
Yes.
that's the data that you're streaming over the cellular network back to your PC.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so we talked about this a little bit, but I'm currently working on so I have this overlay that I built that pulls in data from a heart rate monitor and
Yep.
shows like my current heart rate on stream.
Yep.
The goal is to eventually get other telemetry data off of devices such as like my active speed and cadence,
Yep.
which it's really a virtual speed because it's going to be doing like indoors on a treadmill, but I could totally
Gotcha.
see like going out with my GoPro
Yep.
and
Yep.
doing like an outdoor run or
Yep.
something like that. So like one of my goals, I'm gonna have to collaborate with you on how to get
Absolutely.
this to work. Like that just
Absolutely.
I'm all
You
excited now.
you can combine multiple data sources. One of the things I'm looking to add to the whole ski telemetry setup, I can get these little pucks that are, yay big, and just they're pretty narrow. I can affix them underneath the binding, underneath my boot, between the ski and the boot on the binding. There's enough space there to do it, and they're Bluetooth accelerometers.
Yeah,
And so
because like on
that
the
way,
ski, it connects like at the toe and the heel, right?
yes,
And
and
so you have like a
there's a good
gap.
like inch and a half gap there that I could actually affix the thing to the ski, and that could stream, essentially lateral and axial g-force data to show how many g's my legs are undergoing in a turn. And so we could kind of pull out some of that accelerometer data, which I would think would be some really cool sort of biometric telemetry data to pull out. The other thing I've been thinking, I've got this Apple Watch here, and apparently there are ways through the app that I can get my heart rate via the watch.
Yeah.
And I'm not so interested in the my physical activity heart rate for that for skiing, because my heart rate does not go up that much while I'm skiing most of the time. I'm more interested in when I'm standing at the top of some really gnarly drop and I'm about to go in. What does that heart rate peak out at? And I'm sure it's higher than, exactly, Maddie, sort of for horror games, but this is, standing at the top of something that I'm about to jump off of something stupid that I shouldn't be doing.
No,
Kind of a
absolutely.
deal.
I think that's great. And I would actually, so like everybody who watches my streams know that I'm a triathlon junkie. Like I think it would be really, really cool to like stream a triathlon live,
Absolutely.
like while I'm racing.
Yep.
Because like, the GoPro's waterproof. And so like I could stream the swim
Yep.
and the bike and the run,
Yep.
which the swim would probably be pretty odd for people
Yeah.
like watching because basically like everywhere that you swim in Texas, it's like you put your head in mud and then you'd see my head like turning so that I could breathe. But I
What
think
you'd want to do is put on a chest harness, but put it on your back.
yeah. And
And
you'd
so
still see it doing this in
oh,
the water.
well, so here's the other thing that's crazy about these GoPros that I've noticed. The image stabilization and the leveling it's surreal how good it is at this.
Really?
I was able to take the GoPro, put it on my ski pole, and in one of the streams, if you go back and watch the VODs, I actually turned the ski pole 360 degrees and the image just stays dead still
Wow.
because it's capturing a square sensor, and it shrinks things down enough that it can keep rotating the part that it's outputting as the image
Yeah.
as the sensor rotates.
Yeah.
So it's really impressive how well it does the stabilization and the horizon tracking.
Yeah, I have a friend who takes his out on runs, and he has like one of the, selfie sticks, and he
Yep.
like runs and
Yep.
holds the selfie stick out to get some footage.
Yep.
And it's amazing how stable that footage ends up being, because he's like out doing like outdoor trail running.
Absolutely.
And the footage that he gets off the GoPro is so unbelievably smooth. It almost looks like somebody has like they have like an entire like gyroscopic rig that's doing the stabilization, like somebody's following him down the hill or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, it's really impressive technology that they've put in those things. Although their whole RTMP implementation is a total disaster. Because if it drops the connection, and I found that when I tried to ski with it out west, the problem is the ski areas were big enough that I'd move from one tower to another. And when you would change towers, there's, like a split-second drop in the connection, and it would not reconnect.
Really? So how did you fix that?
And so it was really frustrating keeping things connected, which is why one of the other projects we were working on is a Raspberry Pi that I throw in my ski backpack and put on a battery, and it's the RTMP server that then forwards to my local RTMP server here.
Wow.
And so then it's able to reconnect and keep the connection up, and the GoPro just connects to it locally, and that seems to work pretty well as well. You'll end up seeing me one day out on the ski trip. I'll have like dishes on me.
Okay, so for my brain, help me understand that. So are you connected wirelessly to the Raspberry Pi with like a wireless
connection?
The
Raspberry Pi has an onboard Wi-Fi that connects to the hotspot on my phone. And then I put an additional Wi-Fi USB dongle on it, which connects to the GoPro.
Wow. Okay.
So it's two network. I mean, I need a router like in the backpack too. I mean, it's
that's so interesting.
So the GoPro just sees that second Wi-Fi network, and then it sort of acts as a proxy server that then forwards on the RTMP signal to via the phone.
That's amazing. Okay, so I'm totally gonna have to like pick your brain or like pay you for your time or something so that we can like hash this out. Because now I'm like, everybody knows I've been injured like for the past 6 months. I'm dealing with some like hip issues, and surprisingly, I injured myself from sitting in my chair. So apparently, you can sit for too long in a crappy chair, and that can injure you. And so I'm actually going for an MRI tomorrow for them to just like check out and make sure that there's like nothing structural going on. But like my goal is to get back to running and stuff by the end of the year. And so I want to live stream some of that activity. And that's just more like, that's totally not like a, hey, watch me do this, because I'm really not fast. So, nobody is going to be impressed by my running pace. So yeah, I think you and Heck Brent could totally nerd out on some of this stuff. We'll definitely need to do like a social co-stream, like chatting about this stuff, because I mean, even if chat's not interested, I'm interested.
Yeah, I think it could be a lot of fun. And yeah, Heck Brent, it's something that I've been really trying to figure out, because one of the things I would love to do would be to go out to the mountains. I know Breckenridge in particular has really good coverage on the mountain.
Yeah, they do.
And Big Sky has really good coverage on the mountains. So two places where I could actually like flex the skis a little bit, actually do the stuff that I love to do. Because my local hill here, it's all of 300 feet of vertical. And it's just, I mean, people have watched the stream and everyone has a good time watching it, but it's, 4 minutes up on the chairlift and 19 to 20 seconds to ski down, and then 4 minutes up on the chairlift. And
yeah.
And so, going to some places where we could actually really do some of the fun stuff would be a blast, but it has a lot of those connectivity issues and everything around it. So I
Yeah.
guess I got the whole summer to figure it out before next season. So
Gosh, that sounds like so much fun. So is there, other than the skiing stuff, is there anything else that you're working on or anything else that you might want to chat about?
we've had a lot of little projects on the stream that have been a lot of fun. We have the whole RGB LED matrix that we kind of overrode Twitch's highlight my message, so it actually puts the message on a matrix of RGB LEDs that I've got a camera on that
Yeah.
scrolls across. I love working with physical devices, kind of the whole Internet of Things kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I've been trying to come up with some projects. I've got I'm having an idea drought at the moment, but I've been doing a lot of brainstorming, trying to figure out some new kind of physical Internet of Things type projects to start working on the stream, because I really do. I love that whole idea of you write code and something physical happens.
Oh yeah, so much fun.
To this day, when people redeem that highlight my message on my stream, inside I'm always like, is it gonna work this time? And it does, and I'm like, oh, it's so cool how
Yeah.
someone across the world just sent a message and it's lighting up lights on a thing here in my room. Yeah, it just, I don't know, that really is
Yeah.
one of those things that I'm still in awe at, even though I totally understand how it works. It's like it's just so cool.
Well, it's
You know,
amazing and fun, and like, so my wife isn't necessarily into technology at all, and so like I did the project where like people can redeem channel points and they can change the color on the guitar lights that are sitting in here,
yep.
and like she asked me the question, she was like, "Well, why would you do that?" I'm like, "Because I can."
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, honey, don't you think that's like the coolest thing you've ever seen?
So every time I think about that, so I when Big Bang Theory was new, I watched way too much of it, and it's the episode where they're all sitting in a room, and they send a web request through routers all the way around the world just to turn the lamp on and off.
Yeah.
And then they open it up to where other people can do it. And Penny's
Yep.
standing there and she's like, "Why would you do that?" And he's like, "Wait a minute, do you not understand what just happened?"
What's actually, yeah. Yep. Yeah.
It's
So,
magic.
I think the other thing I really love doing, is I've kind of expressed a little bit here, is this whole idea of interaction with Twitch chat. That's kind of what I've built my stream off of. It's really doing stuff that Twitch chat can affect the stream, and interacting with Twitch chat. And for those of you who are familiar with the clones, that's a project that has been a whole lot of fun, and that's actually where I don't have a lot of idea drought. I just have to do some implementation. So
Yeah.
going forward, I've got some pretty fun. Yes, behind you, Rugmat. I've got some pretty fun ideas for the clones in 2022. I had the idea I'd put out there that I wanted to put together 100 clone interactions in 2021, and we got to about 45, and some big personal issues happened, which kind of put the stop on that for a while. And by the way, when those personal issues happened, for those of you who know, thank you all again. It was absolutely amazing how this community reached out, and just all the love that y'all shared. It was absolutely incredible, and I will never forget that. But yeah, I've got some great ideas, I think, for the clones going forward, and some things that we're going to do. Along with your follower before Rugmat was my pal Roscoe the dog, who comes on and codes during my stream. And Roscoe and Ollie may be making more fun appearances on the stream for Channel Point Redemption. So there are some things in planning right now that I think are going to be a lot of fun for the community. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with the fun stuff. Professionally, wrapping up this big project that I've been working on now for about 4.5 years, and kind of at that crossroads where I'm trying to figure out, do I take that to the next level,
Yeah.
or do I look potentially at getting, more of a traditional position? I know which one Mrs. Singularity would prefer, and coming closer every day to a decision on what I want to do next as I come closer every day to finishing up the project. So there may be some changes with that coming forward, and we'll just have to see. But I
Yeah.
just know it's the technology field is just such a wonderful, wonderful field. All of the people that I interact with, both here on Twitch and in other places, are just amazing. There's so many amazing people in this field, and so many people that I would love to work with and be a part of a community with, and am a part of a community with. And so for me, I think things have nowhere to go but up and in a positive direction. So
Ah, that's so great. Yeah, I mean, you and I have had some conversations
yep.
off of chat about what I think you would be amazing at. Just because watching your streams and interacting with you, you're a natural educator, and
Thank you.
so I always learn something, even if it's like something that's like totally over my head. You just do a great job of being able to, all right, let's, break this down into small manageable chunks and take it one step at a time. Yeah, and Luco Codes is spot on. We've already talked about Devrel. I think that you would be amazing, but yeah, that I wish you nothing but the best in
Thank you.
whatever you do.
Yes.
So yeah, is there, what's the stream schedule like these days? Are you still doing daily streams?